Nikki, Victoria, and Sharon are all sitting at the courthouse and talking about how they think it's going. And Sharon says, I think Michael and Brittany did very well and that it's going well for them. And Nikki and Victoria aren't 100% convinced of that Christine really does want to take down their family, and look what happened with Victor. Brittany asks to speak to Sharon alone, and Sharon walks over with Brittany away from the other ladies. Brittany tells her to stop acting so chummy with Nikki and Victoria because they're co-defendants, not friends. And Sharon says that she can't turn her back on them, that they've bonded over the last few months. And Brittany's like, well, our whole defense is to prove that you're an innocent bystander in this, that you aren't a co-conspirator, and that you had really nothing to do. You're dragged into this against your will. And Sharon worries also about Mariah's testimony. Michael goes and talks to Nikki and Victoria and laments the fact that they haven't given him very much to mount a defense with, and that Victor's outburst in the courtroom didn't help them either. And Victoria said that the jury could also see them as being spoiled and above the law. Michael leaves, and Victoria says maybe they should tell Michael the truth about what happened that night. And Nikki says, nope, we are sticking to her story that she found him in the park, and that's what happened, and that she's the only one to blame for JT's death, and for Victoria to remember that. Anna and Devon are sitting in the dining room at the athletic club going over some business matters, the budget and how they're allocating funds toward advertising and marketing and such. And Devon's impressed by the work Anna has put in and asks her, did she do this on her spare time? And she says, well, I'm still on your payroll. And he said, okay. She looks at him and says, how are you doing? How are you feeling? And he says, feeling better now that I could see the budget. And she says, you had a panic attack the other day. And he says, he's doing okay. He going to see Lola, brought up some memories of Hillary's death. He's not 100% fine, but he's getting there. He knows he doesn't have to numb his feelings, and he can just feel them normally. And Anna tells him that if he needs a break, or if he doesn't want to see anybody, to let her know, and she can keep them at bay. And he says, oh, be my protector. And she says, if I have to be. Jack and Billy are just outside the courtroom and talking about Phyllis's testimony. And Jack says, we really don't know the whole story as of yet. All we've heard is the opening statements. There could be more to it than this. But Billy's saying she's doing this to save herself. She's turned against the other women. And, you can't really have the CEO of Jabot being embroiled in this mess, especially considering she's turning on her friends. And we need to get her out as soon as possible. Abby walks up while Jack and Billy are talking and asks what's going on, and they just say she hasn't missed much, it was just opening statements, and asks for news about Lola. She tells them that people have been getting tested due to Mariah's plea on Juicy Buzz, and now it's just a waiting game. But that Arturo relented and let Kyle in to see Lola, so that was an improvement. And Summer comes up and asks how Kyle's doing. And Abby says, he's hanging in there. It's hard, though. He's lost a lot of people in his life, and he can't lose anymore. Kyle shows up at the athletic club and leans against the bar, and Devon and Anna see him and invite him to come sit with them, and they ask how Lola's doing. He says, right now, it's still a waiting game, and the doctors aren't even trying to hide it anymore. The time's running out. Christine's sitting at her desk making notes on her files when Billy comes over and asks to speak to her. Christine says it's inappropriate right now, Billy, because he has a relationship with the defendants. And he said that, what are you really trying to accomplish here? I know we don't really know each other very well, but I know you're a decent person. And he had gone to see Lily in prison. And while she did want to pay for what she had done to Hillary, she's really a changed person. She's trying to keep a brave face, but she's cracking under the pressure, and he can see that. Christine turns to him and says that what I'm doing here is my job, that if you take a life, you can't just go on living your life as normal, that Hillary and JT aren't here to defend themselves, and it was murder, so that's why she's there. Tessa enters the courtroom and everyone looks at her. Abby asks Nick, what's Tessa doing here? She doesn't see Mariah. And Nick says, I don't know, but I don't trust her, and that she shouldn't either, that no matter where Tessa goes, bad news follows. Kyle is talking with Devon and Anna about Lola's situation, that he's done everything he can do. He has money, he has a name, but there's really nothing else he could do, that Mariah helped more by putting the plea out on the show, and she had gotten the cameraman and all that, and he realizes that Devon owns Juicy Buzz and worries that maybe there was some sort of legal complication that they didn't think of, that they had to clear up with Devon first. But Devon says, no, that, anything that you need, and I mean that, jet, anything, that he's prepared to help Lola get back on her feet. And Kyle says basically that what she needs is a liver donor. And Anna asks, can anybody donate to get tested? And Kyle says, yeah, the lab's ready. So both Devon and Anna decide to head to the hospital to get tested. Carrie shows up in the hallway while Jack, Billy, Abby, and Summer are all talking. And she walks up and they ask what she's doing there. And Billy says, another witness? And she says, I'm just here because Jack is. Summer and Abby both say they have to check their messages and they leave. Billy walks away too, and Jack thanks her for being there, and she said, of course, as long as you're here, the lab can wait, while Billy looks on at a distance. Nick's on the phone with Victor, who's very upset after having been kicked out and wants an update, and Nick tells him he will let him know as soon as he knows anything. Then he hangs up. Micah comes over, and Nick tells him he's just been a bear ever since he got kicked out. And Michael says in the courtroom he's just a mere mortal like everybody else. Billy walks over to Nikki and Victoria asks if he's talked to the kids and how they are. And he says they're fine, they're in school, and not to worry. And they talk about the fact that Christine seems to have a bit of an agenda against them, and Nikki worries that there could be more surprises and bombshells that haven't exploded yet. Summer and Abby are sitting in the courtroom, and Summer gets out to leave, and Abby says, where are you going? The recess is almost done. This is when we sit down, not get up and walk away. And Summer said, I have somewhere else to be. And Abby said, oh, of course you do. You came and showed your dad and everyone else that, you cared, and now you're going off so you don't have to hide the fact that you have no heart. And you can go get your mani-pedi now. And Summer says, oh, yes, you know me so well, Abby, and walks away. Kyle, Anna, and Devon arrive at the hospital, and Kyle says it's just a quick painless blood test, so they can see if they're a match to be a donor. And they see Nate down the hall and walk down to him and tell them that, yeah, Nate says, is everything okay? And Devon goes, oh, everything's fine. You just have 2 potential donors here. And he says, fantastic, and asks to speak to Devon privately. He asked Devon, you don't feel pressure or anything to donate. This is your idea. And he said, oh yeah, he doesn't feel pressure at all, that Anna made sure he feels he's okay. And he asked if the meningitis he had when he was a child wouldn't prevent him from being a donor. And Nate says, no, it should be fine. Great. And he shows them where to go to get tested. And they head down to the lab. Kyle tells Nate that he made a playlist for Lola. And Nate asks, excuse me? And he said he can't be a donor. He's not a surgeon. So he thought he made a playlist of all her favorite songs that he could play for her. And Nate goes, no, that was a good idea. It's smart that sometimes when a patient's in a coma, if they hear familiar voices or songs, that can help bring them back. And he tells him doctor's orders to go play it for her. Carrie's on the phone, and while she's talking, Jack and Billy are off to the side talking, and Billy says to him, she's falling for you, which means she'll probably do whatever you ask her to do. Jack says to Billy, don't forget that she came to Genoa City to work for Phyllis, and don't underestimate friendship. Billy says, relationships always trump friendships. You know that. Always have, always will. And Jack says, we can approach her with helping us, but if she agrees to help us, it's up to her to decide what it is she wants to do for us. Billy agrees to that. Carrie comes over and says, this looks serious. Has there been any news? And Billy says, no, this is just my court face. People aren't used to seeing me this serious. Abby sticks her head out of the courtroom and lets Billy, Jack, and Carrie know that the recess is over and for them to come back in. They head back inside the courtroom. The judge brings the proceedings to order and tells Christine she's to call her first witness. She calls Mariah to the stand. Mariah enters the courtroom, and everyone turns around to look at her. Christine asks Mariah to recount what happened that night, and if she did know more than she's been letting on. And Mariah said, other than the fact that she made strong margaritas, she doesn't remember much. And Christine asked her, do you have memory lapses a lot? And Mariah asked, no, she was drunk that night. And Christine asked her, is she friends with Victoria Newman? And Mariah says, well, we're family, sort of, due to association. And Christine goes, but are you friends? And she said, no. And Christine asked her, then why would you attend such an intimate gathering? And she said, because her mother planned it. She was trying to make Victoria feel better, cheer her up after JT's breakup. And she wasn't sure how many friends Victoria's friends she could gather. And Mariah had bartending experience. So that's why she ended up going. And that's also the kind of person that Sharon is. She wants to make people feel better. And that it was a good thing that JT was out of her life. And Christine made it sound that, oh, she got him out of her life that night, didn't she? And Michael objects. Devon and Anna come back from having their blood tested, and Anna tells Devon that he did really well. And he says, oh, well, I'm not really afraid of needles, and I'm not going to fall apart with my little sister sitting right there. And so they joke a little bit about that. And she says, I'm glad that you're doing better, and maybe eventually one day you'll find love again. And she realizes that it's a little too soon for him to think about dating again, and she apologizes. And he said it's okay. He goes, he's been wondering when people would start asking when he's going to start dating, but it's only been about 7 months since Hillary's death, so he can keep putting people off for a little bit longer. And he asks, what about her? What about her love life? And she said she dated once and mixed business with pleasure, and she won't do that again. But now she's focusing on writing music, and she's got a couple songs that are almost ready to be recorded. And Devon asks if he can hear her sing it, and she says, no, they'll find the right performer. And she said, the money won't hurt either. And he asked, what about the money from Fenn's song? And she said, well, her shameful past of debt kind of ate that all up. And he tells her he could give her the money if she needs it. But she says, no, she has to do it herself. And then she will save money for her own place. But she says, you can buy me a coffee, though. Kyle comes out of Lola's room and stands there looking serious, and Summer walks up and he looks at her. Christine is still questioning Mariah, and Mariah is saying that everybody keeps saying that the get-together was like a party, a fun night, but it really was a matter of just trying to cheer Victoria up after the breakup of JT, and she goes on trying to explain that, and Christine tells the judge that, this is only supposed to be a question and answer kind of thing, and the judge instructs Mariah to only answer the questions and that it's not a free-for-all. So Christine asks her, where did she pass out? And Mariah says she passed out in the den and woke up there and it was dark. And that she came into the living room and none of the ladies were there. And Christine asked, did she leave? And she said no. Mariah had said she thought the ladies had left her there to sleep it off. But she heard voices upstairs, so she went up to see what was going on. She heard Victoria's voice. And Christine asked what happened. And she said she knocked on the door, bedroom door, and Sharon answered it and told her that they were doing a closet purge, getting rid of stuff that Victoria no longer needed. Christine asked her, did she invite you in? And Mariah said no. And Christine thought, well, wasn't that weird? And Mariah said she didn't think of it that way. And Christine asked how did she get home that night, and Mariah said that her mom called for a car for her to pick her up, and Christine said she didn't drive you herself, and Michael objects, saying that what's the relevance, and Christine says that her daughter's safety wasn't as important as what was going on behind that door, and it is relevant. The judge overrules Michael's objection. Kyle asked Summer why isn't she at the trial, and she said that, it's just going to be he said, she said, and anything she needs to know will be on the internet anyway or on the news, so she can find out then, and there's nothing she can really do to help her dad or her grandmother anyway. And he says, well, there's really nothing you can do to help me either. And she goes on and says when her mother was sick, she talked to her all the time, and she believes that Phyllis could hear her. And she said the way that she could help Kyle was to get tested and see if she could be the one to help save Lola. At the court, the bailiffs roll over a TV screen, and Mariah asks Christine, she doesn't understand why she's still sitting up there. And Christine says, because they're going to show a video that you might be able to verify. Summer is waiting for Kyle to thank her for being willing to get tested and to take her to the lab. But he doesn't say much, and she goes, I've known you my whole life, and I'm doing this for you as a favor to you, and of course for Lola, because she needs it. She goes on about more or less him not being grateful for it. And he goes, this is unbelievable. You're trying to do this to win me back. And then she goes on a rant saying that, no, this isn't about you. I'm just trying to do something genuine and good-natured and try to save somebody's life, and you're making it about you. And I'm trying to help make you feel better because you're in a bad state, and here you are more or less saying that I have bad motives and all this sort of thing. And so Kyle apologizes and thanks her for being there and being willing to get tested, and he starts to lead her toward the lab. Nate shows up when Kyle is showing Summer where the lab is, and he says, we have another volunteer. He says, fantastic, and he directs her to where the lab is. And Kyle says, this is a good thing, right? The more people are getting tested, the more likely they'll find a match. And Nate says, yes, it's a good thing, but finding a match is just the first start. While the video is playing, Christine apologizes that there is no audio and that they had retrieved the file from a deleted file off the computer servers. She asks Mariah to verify the timestamp, and Mariah does. Asks her to verify if she knows the women in the video, and she says she does, and she indicates them by pointing toward their table. And Christine asks, don't you think it was odd that this happened? Or when was the first time you saw the video? And Mariah says it was after the fact, that she'd gotten a tip about this video and it was sent to her, and she viewed it. Christine wonders, why didn't she give it to the police? And she goes, well, she works in media. She knows how it works, that anybody could alter the videotape at any time and make it look like something that it wasn't. And Christine said, don't you think it was odd that at a party these women are throwing out rummage at the middle of the night? Michael objects, and the judge sustains it, that it's argumentative. Mariah gets up to leave, and Michael tells her, nope, we're not done yet. Anna and Anna run into Kyle, and they say, unfortunately, they're not a match for Lola, but they will try to do what they can to bring more people in to get tested. They'll put it up on the website, across all Devon's media streams, to see how many people that they can bring in. Kyle thanks them anyway, and he hugs them, and they leave. Summer shows up, and they're waiting for the lab results, and she said, hey, maybe I'm the golden ticket. I'm young, I believe in moderation, and who knows? So Kyle walks away, and Summer turns to Nate and asks, how dangerous is the surgery for a donor? Michael asks about that she received the video as an anonymous tip, and Mariah says that's correct. And he said, well, did it come by email? And she said yes. And he said, well, then it's not really anonymous, is it? You have the email address even if you don't recognize it. And she said, I guess. And he said, yes. And then he asked her, did it go to the Juicy Buzz email account or to her own personal email account? And she hesitates to answer that. And he said, well, we can subpoena to find out exactly which account it came from. He goes, or you could just tell us, when did you really first see the video? Well, that's it for today's episode recap. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe for the daily recaps of The Young and the Restless. Thank you for watching. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.